We're going to go over Chapter 6 for 5 minutes and then take a break. But in this chapter, you'll learn how to declare an array and assign values to array elements. I've already shown you one way of doing that. How to access array elements. I've shown you that. How to search an array using a loop. All right, I've shown you how to do that. All right. How to do what's called a binary search. We'll talk about that. How you can sort an array. It's real hard. It's one line of code. It's the name of, it's array.sort, and then you put the name of the array in there. Okay? How you can reverse an array. How you can use multi-dimensional arrays. And I've shown you this before, but as an example, yeah, I'm bringing this up. But if you come in here, that is a multi-dimensional array. It's made up of rows that go up and down and columns that go across. Finally, appreciate array issues in GUI programs. You may have noticed that all these programs I showed you were console programs. It is much easier to work with arrays in console programs than it is in GUI programs. That's how the chapter ends. So, again, I don't want to sit there and read out of the book for you. When I started to write this program, and I was going to literally sit there and say, string student 1 equals John. First name equals John. String 1, student 1 last name equals Young, etc. And imagine that. With those 4 or 5 variables, with 12 of you, that would have been 60 variables. All right. Now, setting it up as an array, it doesn't matter if there's 1 of you, 2 of you, or 2,000 of you. All right. I only have to set it up once. That's one of the biggest values with arrays. Not only that, arrays work well with loops, especially for loops. All right. So here are a couple definitions. An array is a list of items that all have the same data type and they all have the same name. Each array element is referenced by what's called a subscript, starting with 0. Some books call them an index. As they show you on the bottom here of whatever page this is, 224, here's the way you can create an array. Double, bracket, bracket, space, sales. All right. It says you can provide any name for an array you want. All right. Arrays are often named using plural nouns, like instead of sale, it would be sales because you're holding a number of them. All right. And a lot of people put the word array on the end. All right. I did it. You don't have to do it. Okay. After you declare an array variable, as it says here, you need to create the actual array. This is declaring the variable. You've seen that before. This is initializing the array. So you can do it as 2 statements or, as we looked at in the past, 1. What's new, if you look up on the screen here, what's new is the word new. Since an array is a data structure, what you're creating in here is what's called an array object. Whenever you create an array object, you have to let the system know that it's an object with the word new. All right? As it says here, the statement double bracket bracket sales equal new double 20 reserves 20 contiguous, typically, memory locations. All right? Seems like this is a good place right here to stop. So it is 8:50. Let's come back, please, at 9:05. All right, let's continue on then. If you look, I'm on page 226, and the first sentence here says, in C#, an array subscript, that's the thing in those brackets, must be an integer. That's true. But it can also be a variable or a constant that holds an integer. All right, but you can't, like in here, this is totally legit. Sales 1, sales 2, etc. But I couldn't put pi in there. I couldn't put 3.14, etc. I couldn't put double quote hello in there, double quote. All right, so that's what they're talking about in there. All right. As they mention, a common mistake when you work with arrays is to forget that the first element in the array is element 0. You often get what's called off by 1 errors, where you either go 1 too far in the array or 1 too few in the array. All right, we all do it. The author has got, if you look here, she's got her own video for declaring an array. I've never watched one of her videos, so I can't say anything about it. Her name's Joyce Farrell. If you go out to her website, she's got links in there to all her videos, I believe. All right. Okay, arrays are part of a class that's called system.array. All right. And if you notice here, it says built-in class, which means there's no using statement you have to put in. You automatically get everything that exists in an array. And what does that mean? Well, I've shown you this site before, but if you look up on the screen here, if I go out to msdn.microsoft.com, which is the Microsoft Developer Network, okay, and it's probably going to take a while. I've got way too much stuff open right now. Yeah, I do. All right. But if I go out there, if it ever would come back, and I go out there and I type in C# system.array, it would show me all of the different things that are available in the array class. Well, it's taken too long, so I'm not going to show you. All right. In fact, I could probably close all these now. So again, if I go out to msdn.microsoft.com and I go out here and in the search box, I put in system.array or C# system.array, it's going to find a lot of stuff. I just don't want to have it take that long. But it's going to find a lot of stuff that's in there. Yes, sir. Yeah, wait a minute. Do you want me to give a shtick? Sure. All right, let me stop this for a second because I'm recording. So, all right. So again, notice the sentence here. Arrays are objects. When we get into Chapter 9 and Chapter 10, it's all about object-oriented programming. Anybody ever heard of the word, of the phrase a paradigm shift? Anybody ever heard of that? It's a shift in the way of thinking. Okay, and what it means is, like before cars, nobody thought of a car. You know what I mean? And once you started getting cars, horses and carriages, etc., that whatever was available before that kind of became obsolete. All right? Object-oriented programming is also a paradigm shift. It's a shift in a way of thinking. But you're starting to get into it now. And what the good news is for you is whether you realize it or not, you've been working with objects the entire semester. Whenever you've been putting a button on the screen, that's a button object. You put a label on the screen or a bunch of labels, those are label objects, etc. Notice what happens when you create arrays. All right? And what happens is C# does some work for you. So if I come through here and I say int bracket bracket grades equals new int, let's just say I put 100 in there. That takes all 100 of those locations and it sets them all equal to 0 without me having to do it. All right, which is kind of a nice thing. Otherwise, I have to put it into a loop and initialize it to 0, etc. So it takes numbers to 0, characters get set to basically what's called the empty string, and Booleans are automatically set to false. All right. if you look right here, here are 3 different ways. If you want to set up an array and give it initial values, you can do it. Now, I don't know about you, but just looking at this, I'm going to do it the 3rd way for obvious reasons. It's the least amount of typing. So you'll never see me, if I'm going to pre-initialize an array, do it the first 2 ways. I don't understand. I understand that you can do that. I don't understand why you'd ever want to do that. All right? Here's where it gets a little bit confusing if you look at this. It says an array of characters can be assigned to a string. This is an array, right there. So the 0th element is H. The element 1 is E. Element 2 is L. Element 3 is L. Element 4 is an O. And after you set it up, you can set it equal to a string. Now, I could ask you this, but I don't want to embarrass anybody. But if I said to you, how many elements are in this string? If you asked me, I'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Doesn't that make sense? H-E-L-L-O. There's actually 6, because what ends up getting put into the string is this. That \n shows that you've reached the end of the string. So there really are 6 elements in there. All right? Do you have to care about that? No. The \n doesn't show up. Then you would do it the other way that we looked at before, where you'd set it up as characters. All right? But a string automatically is going to have that. There is no way that I know of in any language, because as soon as you remove that, technically it's no longer a string. It's now a character array. All right? And usually when you do toString, etc., it's going to put that on there anyway. All right. There's your old 2 truths and a lie. Now notice this accessing array elements. Remember before when I just went through the example, and in here, all the ones that I showed you were LCV. That just meant the current array element. That's all it is. This is the one time, again, if you don't want to use LCV, you can use IJK or X, Y, and Z or whatever. All right? It says if you treat each array element as an individual entity, declaring an array doesn't offer much advantage over declaring individual variables. You could do this, but most of the time you don't. Most of the time, you put it into a loop. You can use any of the 3 loops we've been talking about. So you can use a while loop, a for loop, or a do while loop. Almost always, when you work with an entire array, you use a for loop, because it's the least amount of code. And arrays, if you're using the entire array, it's definite. You know exactly how big it is. Arrays have a built-in property that's called length. I think you'd agree, if you look in here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements in this array. Not saying how, that they're element 0, element, it doesn't matter. There's 5 of them. So if I asked for the length of the array, the length would come back as 5. So rather than saying this, sub less than 5, as you see on the next page, you could say less than the name of the array dot length. And when you do that, all right, when you do that, that's a capital L. Would you agree when you look at what's up here? Would you agree there's no parentheses after the word length? Would you agree with that? That means that length is a property. It's not a method. It's actually something, but you can't change that. You can't change that property. Once you set up an array, its length is set. So I believe if you look in your properties window, it'll never show length in there as a property because it's not something you can set. All right, that's kind of what they're saying in here about the read-only. I'll let you look at that yourselves. All right, yes?
When you say that you can't set it, does that mean that like, once you start a program, you can't have to
No, you can, okay. Question, tell me if I'm answering your question, okay? I can do this. So I can come in here at the beginning and I can say int, bracket, bracket, students, okay, like that. All right, then I can do a write line in here and a read line that says how many students are in here, okay? Then I can come in and say students, equals new array, and let's say what I asked for in there was just called number. Then I can say number. Yes, I can do that. Is that answering your question? That you can do, yes. But once you set it, you can't change it. It's set forever. Oh, I want another element. Then what you have to do is create a new array that's one bigger and copy everything else over there one at a time in a loop. All right? In this language. Other languages give you other ways of doing it, but that's how you do it in this language. Now, there is a shortcut. When you want to go through a for loop, it's called a for each. And notice the name of the array is pay rates, and that's this. Where they get money from, they made it up. You could have called that Luke, and it would have worked just fine. All right? But it is a way that you can go through a loop. It's faster than a for loop. It's internally faster, and you do less typing. All right? There's a few caveats with it. Try it. All right? But notice what it says. You can only use it if you want to access every array element and it's read-only. So you can't use a for each and change any value in the array. So, well, I want to change it. It's like you said, well, I want to go in and do something. Then you got to use a regular for. Yes? There's no what? For an array? No, there's not. Did that ever come up on here? So here's the array class, some examples. This is from msdn.microsoft.com. Always a great place to start when you're looking. But somewhere, here we go. It's there. Methods. Okay, it's not coming up. There's the properties of an array. Here are the methods. So you can do any of this stuff. You notice there's quite a few of them. Okay, it's alphabetized. I'm only through F. But if you look in there, there's no append. It doesn't make sense. And the main reason for that, and I mean, you may have worked with this in other languages, I don't know. But arrays in this language are known as early binded. That means at compile time, the system needs to know exactly how much room to set aside. In JavaScript that we did last semester, arrays are late binded. So that means while the program's running, you can change it, and it'll automatically update. You can't do that here. All right. Again, when you're if or when you struggle in here, look at these you do it's. I've said this before. Sorry if I sound like a broken record, but she goes through, and this is where this author to me shines. She says, I'm going to do this. Here's how you set it up. All right. Here's all the code. Here's what it should look like when you run it. This is a very simple example. It's all on one page. All right. All right, turning up to 233. On 233, the author talks about searching for a value inside of a loop. And there are different ways that you can do this. All right, I may have told you this earlier, but I just find it funny because maybe I have a weird sense of humor. But I remember a couple years ago, actually it was very many years ago, because Bob Barker was still the host of The Price is Right. And it was summer, I was off, and I was watching A Price is Right. All right? And he had a guy on there. It's got to be a guy for a story like this. Because the idea was he had a minute where he could guess the price of a refrigerator and win it. All right? So the guy said, $700. And he goes, higher. And the guy said, 701. And I'm thinking, you ain't going to win. Does that make sense? Because he was just going up a buck at a time. Now, if he had said $700, and he said higher, and he said $1,000, and he said lower, now you know what's in that window, right? Now you take half of that, and you say whatever that is, like $850, lower. Now you know it's between $700 and $850. The reason I'm telling you that is when you do a search, one of the best ways to do a search in an array is to do what's called a binary search. With a binary search, you've got a list of values. They have to be in sorted order. So 1, 17, 43, 86, and 100. All right, I just made 5 right there. So what you do is you say, hey, is 76 in there? You and I can look at it and say no, but you're not the computer. So you cut it in half. Basically, you go right there and you go, is that the number? No. Is it higher or lower than that number? It's higher. So we know it's either in there or it's not. It doesn't exist. All right? So what you do is you cut it in half again. There is no half. So you check this one. You say, is it higher or lower? Well, it's lower. And you already know that there is nothing lower. So you know it can't be in there. That's a binary search. All right? And they show you, there's actually, if you're like, well, that seems hard. There is a built-in method in that system.array that I showed you called binary search. It'll do it for you. Why is that important? Because when you take your next test, you will be doing sorting in both forward and backward directions. You will be doing a binary search. You will be doing all those. All right? There are other ways that you can search. The easiest is a sequential search. Let's just pretend for a second that it's back in the olden days, like when I was your age, when there were no unlisted phone numbers, you got a phone book, and everybody was in it. All right? So I want to call Christian. Okay? Well, you say, well, what's his last name? Groves, right? And so you look at the G's, you start going through there, you find it. Okay? I find it, boom, I give him a call. But in the worst case, he's either not in there or there's a bunch of Christian Groves. All right? Now I say, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, the phone book's not in any kind of order. Well, now in the worst case, I'm going to go look through the whole frickin' phone book to find nothing. In the best case, it's the first one in there. All right? So what happens when you do a sequential search is your list of values doesn't have to be in order. That's the good news. The bad news is it takes a hell of a long time. On average, you have to search half the list. So the bigger the list is, the longer the search is. Now, it doesn't take long for a computer to do a search, not like you and I, but even imagine that there's 1 trillion values in there. It could take the computer quite a bit of time, all right, depending on how sophisticated or what it is you're looking for, type of an idea. All right. When they talk about a parallel array, that's 2 arrays that basically are running at once. Okay? So they show you an example in here of how you could manually look for a value. Okay? So what are we looking for? Well, notice what we have. We have what are called parallel arrays. For every product there is, it has a price. Product price, etc. So now what you can do is you can search to see if the product that you have is a valid product. Does that make sense? So again, you could use one of those binary searches that I told you about before. So I want to know, is 250 in here? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I say I'm looking for 250. I say, is 250 in there? No. So I know it can't be any of these. Does that make sense? It just can't be any of them. So now I cut it in half again. And I say, okay, here. All right, is that it? No. Is it higher or lower? It's higher. So it has to be either these 2 or it's not in there. That's what the computer does for you when you use the binary search method. What's nice is the computer does it for you. What's bad is if you use other languages, you got to write that yourself. You don't in this language. You still can. You could write your own search, but you don't have to. Another search that's really popular is something that's called a bubble search, which you may or may not have ever heard of. But if I put in 5 numbers here, all right, what it does is it says which one's lower, 8. So it changes these. Which one's lower, etc. So it's going to actually now say that 8 and 27, nope. 8 and 96, nope. 8 and 4, yep. So it puts a 4 here and it puts an 8 down there. So after every time you go through, you have one less thing to check. In other words, the smallest value will bubble up to the top, or if you write it the other way, the largest value will bubble down to the bottom. All right? They talk in here about how you can make loops work better. Well, the idea is if I find something, why don't I get out? So if I'm looking for something in an array, I shouldn't look anymore. I found it. Get out. And that's what they're saying here. That's one way you can make it work better. All right. Use a while loop to search an array. Why a while loop and not a for loop? Because remember, what you're searching for may not be in there. You don't know how many times you're going through it. So you can't use a for loop, which is a counting loop. And again, they show you examples with all this stuff in here. Searching an array for a range match. Do you want to see? I mean, again, you should be able to look at what's on the screen right here. You should be able to look at that. Move my mess here. And figure that out. That says if you order 1 to 12 of a quantity, you get no discount. 13 to less than 50, you get 10%. 50 to less than 100, 14%. 100 to less than 200 is 18%. 200 or more is 20%. So in other words, you know, that's one of the reasons places like Walmart can sell so cheap, right? Because they buy in such bulk. All right. For Christmas, my daughter got me, my wife and I, a temporary thing at Sam's. I'd never been into one before. And that's even different than Walmart. All right. I mean, when I saw a can of corn that was like this big, it just freaked the hell out of me. It's like, who's going to eat that? All right. But the point is, you set this up. Now you can say, okay, tell me the number ordered. If it's 57, it's got to be in the 50 to 99 range. If it's 37, it's got to be in the 13 to 49 range. And that's what they set up in here. All right, they talk about allowing you to perform a range match to see if something falls within a certain range. All right, these, I already mentioned the binary search method to you on whatever it is, 241 or 242 here. So I already mentioned this to you, and I showed you, or told you at least, how it works. All right. Again, it splits it in half repeatedly as you get closer and closer. It must be, whatever list you're searching must be in sorted order. What if it's not in sorted order? Then, if it's not in sorted order, you call the sort method. This is how you sort it. If you look right on your screen here, so you put in 5 names: Olive, Patty, Richard, Ned, Mindy. They're not in any order. Then it's the word array with a capital A, dot sort with a capital S, then the name of your array. So when you run it on that, afterwards, it looks like this. It's in sorted order. All right? Let's say I wanted it in reverse order, so I wanted it to go Richard, Patty, Olive, Ned, Mindy. Everybody with me? I just want it in reverse order. There is no reverse sort, so after you do the sort, then you say array dot reverse names. So you sort first, then you reverse it. All right, that's how you get, you know, other languages have a reverse sort method. For whatever reason, this language does not. That's most often how you're going to use the sort and the sort in reverse. All right. Again, she gives you some examples in here. You like hers better? Cool. All right. On the bottom of 245, another you do it example. All right, and it's 3 pages long. Notice, you create an array of integers, you use the sort and reverse methods to manipulate it. All right. And they show you all the code, and then they show you it in original order, in sorted order, and in reverse order. You're going to do something very similar to this when you take your test on Chapter 6. I mean, it's not a warning. It's not a threat. For lack of better words, it's a promise. All right? Next, they talk about starting on the bottom of page 247, using a multi-dimensional array. All right? And I already mentioned to you that an example of a multi-dimensional array is right here. They're rows and columns. So if I, right here where my mouse is, technically where I am is it says up here I'm in A1, which means what? I'm in row 1, column A. Now I'm in row 1, column B. The only difference is when you do this with arrays, these are both numbers. So that number right there, if I was here, that would be 0, 0. Row 0, column 0. This would be 0, 1. Row 0, column 1. This would be 1, 0. Row 1, column 0, etc. And she goes through this. She does a pretty nice job running through the stuff in here, but I'm just kind of hitting the highlights with you. Okay. You can have arrays of virtually unlimited dimensions. So you could have a 3-dimensional array, etc. It's hard. Typically, you don't see arrays in more than 3 dimensions because it's hard for people to create an array when they can't imagine it in their head. I probably told you this. I thought it was funny, but it turned out to not be funny. It turned out to be one of the dumber things I've ever done. I went over this years and years ago in a class when I was teaching in Wisconsin, and I told the students, now go home and draw yourself a 4-dimensional array and turn it in on Monday. And I had students emailing me all weekend saying, I don't know how to do something in 4D. You know, it was a joke. It was a dumb joke, but it was a joke. So I had to send out a mass email and hope people read it saying, no, it was a joke. Don't do that. All right. You see how ugly this could get when you do it. This is when they're setting up an array. Okay. It's a 2-dimensional array because there's 2 numbers in here. And how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. All right. I will not, I at least do not plan on for your test having you do anything in multi-dimensional arrays. Doesn't mean that they're not important. They do serve a place. You know, it depends on how you want to use them and the situation in which you want to use them. C# is getting to be like more and more other programming languages in that it lets you use, where is it? What's called a jagged array. If you look up on the screen here, and this is pages 251 and 252 in your book. What that means is each row can have a different number of columns in it. Okay, and if you say, I don't get it, yeah, you do. I mean, if you look up here, I've got a row, and it's got 5 numbers in it. They don't mean anything. Here I've got another one, and it's only got 3 columns of numbers in it. That's jagged, because they don't all have the same number of rows and the same number of columns. All right? So as the author mentions in the book here, okay, a jagged array is a 1-dimensional array where each other element is in an array. All right? Each row can be of different lengths, so it can have a different number of columns. There may be reasons for using this. The author gives you one in here. You know, look at it yourself and see if that makes sense or doesn't make sense. Finally, the last 2 pages, 253 and 254, array issues in GUI programs. Remember, when you're running a GUI program, it's all based on user interaction, right? It's event-driven. It's you pushing a button or doing something else. So arrays don't really work all that well. It says, if the array values change based on user input, the array must be stored outside of any method that reacts with the event. The bottom line is this. Can you use this? If you look on the screen, sure you can. They're expecting here that you're putting in what? 4 contributions. You put in 1, you hit enter, you put in another, you hit enter. When you get all done, or when you're done, you got another button there, and notice, all right, you can make it work. I'm not going to lie to you, there's probably a good chance your next program will have, your next test will have 1 program, and it very well might be a console program because it's easier to interact with arrays using console programs. Right? And that's it. I would advise looking through the summary and the key list of terms. let's go over, hold on.